Donald Trump is back to his usual tricks, picking fights with America's sworn enemy, the cold northern country of Canada. Gone are the days when the United States government at least pretended to be the leader of the free world. Instead of fighting terrorists in the Middle East and liberating people from brutal dictators, they now have a new enemy, Canada. I'm a journalist based in Toronto, Canada, and I usually cover politics from a conservative perspective. However, I'm getting sick and tired of the President of the United States attacking my country, and I'm getting tired of so-called conservatives in my country taking his side on literally every single thing. Hence, I've created a whole new channel just to address this issue. I'll be commenting on the current trade war between Canada and the United States, as well as calling out Canadian Trump supporters, or Maple Mega as I like to call them, for their traitorous behavior. Donald Trump is once again attacking my country's economy, this time over a bridge that connects the Canadian province of Ontario to the American state of Michigan. Despite approving of the bridge back in 2017, he appears to have forgotten about that. Now he's done a 180 and he says that he doesn't approve of the bridge. And as usual, his attacks are untrue and they're completely unhinged. Now I'm also going to show you what some of his supporters in my country are saying. But first, let's take a look at what the Prime Minister of Canada had to say.
Discussed the bridge. I explained that Canada, of course, paid for the construction of the bridge, over $4 billion, that the ownership is shared between the state of Michigan and the government of Canada, and that in the construction of the bridge, obviously there's Canadian steel, Canadian workers, but also U.S. steel, U.S. workers that were involved. This is a great example of cooperation between our countries. Look forward to it opening. And what is particularly important, of course, is the commerce and the tourism and the voyages of Canadians and Americans that will go across that bridge.
Now, the contrast between the Canadian Prime Minister and the American President couldn't be more pronounced. Mark Carney is well-educated and he's well-spoken, which is completely different from the American president, who acts like a toddler having a temper tantrum every single day. It's also telling how the Canadian Prime Minister used the word explain, as in he had to explain what the facts were to the President of the United States. It's like a grown man talking to a toddler. Actually, that's exactly what it is. Now let's take a look at Trump's comments on Truth Social last night and how out of touch they really are.
Now, this new controversy was sparked by a rambling social media post by Donald Trump filled with accusations and false claims about the bridge project. The CBC's Aaron Collins is in Washington with more.
There's a lot to unpack in this one social media post, which is often the case when they come from President Trump. This post, as you mentioned, it's long, it was meandering, it wasn't really very focused, but the broad strokes, if we want to sort of get to that, does revolve around this new Gordie Howe Bridge connecting Windsor and Detroit, set to open very soon. It's completed. There was some talk of a ribbon cutting maybe in March or April. That's not entirely clear. But Trump's essentially threatening not to let that happen unless the U.S. is, quote, fully compensated for everything we have given them. It's unclear what the president is after here, though, Arthi. I mean, this is a project Trump called vital during his first term. As you heard from Premier Ford, he fast-tracked it in 2017. Canada, as you heard from the Prime Minister, paid for the entire cost of building the bridge. And Michigan is going to maintain part ownership. So a sense among many observers that the U.S. president is just plain wrong.
Now, I love how these journalists have finally given up on giving Trump the benefit of the doubt, and they're calling it for what it is. Donald Trump is putting out stuff, and the stuff that he's putting out is wrong. Now, people used to speculate about Trump's motives for attacking Canada, as if it could be part of some negotiation strategy. However, it's becoming more clear that that's not what's happening, and Trump is just hell-bent on turning America into a pariah state, sort of like North Korea or Russia.
What he's saying is not true. He's badly informed. You know, in his first term, he had some staff around him that were well-informed and tried to restrain him. Now, he's got a lot of crackpots working for him and telling him things that simply aren't true. The fact is the bridge is complete. We've been planning a major celebration, a ribbon cutting, for perhaps late March or early April.
This would be hilarious if it wasn't so serious. The President of the United States is literally picking fights with Canada of all places. And not only is he picking fights, but he's attacking my country without even getting his facts straight. The funny thing is how Donald Trump has completely given up on even trying to sound believable when he makes stuff up. Anybody with half a brain, or at least a post-secondary education all over the world is scratching their heads looking at this madman, wondering what he's going to do next.
And so the bridge wasn't the only topic covered in this social media post. It rambled on for about 300 words, and some of the other, I don't know if you want to call them highlights or lowlights, what have you. The president railed again against Ontario no longer selling American alcohol. There's the complaints we've heard many times before about U.S. dairy farmers being charged tariffs. And this one, really difficult to wrap your head around. He seems to be bothered by Canada negotiating in any way trade deals with China, something the president quite bizarrely says will lead to the outlawing of hockey in Canada. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And certainly we have had a lot of reaction too on this side of the border. We've heard from the Prime Minister, we've heard from Ontario's Premier, as well as the Mayor from Windsor, all within the last 24 hours since that post came out from the U.S. President. What about the U.S.? What are we hearing from inside the United States when it comes to this threat?
Yeah, response from down here south of the border was quick, and especially from Democratic politicians in Michigan, a slew of them weighing in here, including a spokesperson for Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who wrote, it's gonna open, referring to the bridge, one way or another, and the governor's looking forward to attending that ribbon cutting. So an acknowledgement from officials here about the importance economically on both sides of the border of this project. All of this happening, of course, as negotiations over a new Canada-U.S. free trade agreement sort of loom in the background. But members of the Trump administration are saying that those negotiations are completely separate to talks about the bridge.
The Gordie Howe Bridge is Canadian-owned and operated, and there's a concern, a valid concern on the part of the president, that this bridge was allowed to be built. They didn't necessarily use American content in a bridge that's going into the United States. There's a question as to the proceeds of tolls, et cetera, and so there's going to be a negotiation on that front.
What Donald Trump does is make the most insane claims, and the people around him and the people that support him just pretend like it's true. The truth is not the truth. The truth is what Donald Trump says it is. And if you don't believe in that version of the truth, you have Trump derangement syndrome. You're a liberal. You're a bad person.
I think it's important, whatever happens here, to keep context of these posts in mind. You can't necessarily take the president's musings on social media at face value. We have ample proof of that. Recently Donald Trump's posted about tariffs on Canada's planes, tariffs because we were dealing with China. Those haven't materialized. So it's just really, really hard, Arthi, to know how seriously to take any of this.
Aaron Collins made a fantastic point right here. It used to be when the president of the United States said something, people listened. Those words had value. Now, because of Donald Trump, it's the complete opposite. Now people all over the world, and even in the United States, just roll their eyes and say, look what Grandpa posted today. This should concern anybody. This isn't even partisan at this point. Whether you're left-wing or right-wing, American, Canadian, or wherever, especially Canadian, this should concern you. Now, what really makes my blood boil is the fact that right-wingers or so-called conservatives in Canada are very sympathetic to Trump, at least on social media. This stuff really makes my blood boil. I'm going to give you an example. So Canadian conservative influencer Mario Zelaya had this interpretation of Trump's post. Let's take a look at that. Trump is not an idiot. He knows Carney is stalling trade talks for political purposes and no other reason. Trump is forcing Carney back to the table. Carney needs to make a choice. Does Canada continue to get decimated so he can selfishly attempt a majority? Or does he do the right thing and focus on a trade deal? So that's the usual Maple Mega talking point. If Donald Trump attacks Canada, it's somehow Carney's fault. Everything that Donald Trump says is gospel to these people, and they don't even fact check it or think critically about it. They accept it as gospel, and then they offer their own interpretations. And a lot of times, their interpretations are more unhinged than what Donald Trump originally said. So let's break down Mario's post. Mario starts off by saying that Donald Trump is not an idiot. Okay, well, maybe he is, maybe he's not. But if he was so smart, couldn't he make his point without lying? You think that a smart person would be able to say something without resorting to falsehoods. Mario continues to glaze over all the misinformation, all the falsehoods that Donald Trump spreads. And then he also admits the fact that it was Donald Trump that threatened our sovereignty, and that's how we got into this whole mess in the first place. Mario conveniently admits the fact that Donald Trump was the one that signed the current trade deal with Canada, CUSMA, or as the Americans call it, USMCA. He also admits the fact that it was Donald Trump that violated that trade agreement because of a made-up reason, fentanyl. And everyone knows that all the fentanyl, or the majority of fentanyl getting into the United States, comes from Mexico and not Canada. Everyone except for Donald Trump, that is. This guy is clearly mentally unwell, but of course they conveniently leave that part out. Mario's post is more or less in line with what all these other right-wing dipshits in Canada are saying. Everything that Trump does that's negative towards Canada, it's somehow Carney's fault. That's the best they can offer. Now, what drives me nuts about these Canadian Trump supporters is that they obviously don't live in America. They live in Canada, a country which is negatively affected by Donald Trump's insane trade policies. And what makes my blood boil is that these people claim to be patriots. These people spent the last 10 years talking about how patriotic they were. And now that Donald Trump is attacking us, they take his side? Now, here's the kicker. It has come to light, thanks to a recent New York Times piece, that Donald Trump shutting the bridge down has nothing to do with Canada and everything with helping his billionaire buddy make more money. Let's check this out. Billionaire owner of a bridge connecting Michigan with Canada met Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, on Monday, hours before President Trump lambasted a competing span, in the latest flashpoint in the deteriorating relationship between the United States and Canada. Matthew Maroon is a Detroit-based trucking magnate whose family has operated the Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario for decades. He met on Monday with Mr. Lutnick in Washington, according to two officials briefed on the meeting who requested anonymity to discuss a private conversation. After that meeting, Mr. Lutnick spoke with Mr. Trump by phone about the matter. Shortly afterward, Mr. Trump threatened to block the planned opening of a new bridge between Detroit and Windsor, which could take away toll revenue from Mr. Moran's crossing if Canadian officials did not address a long list of grievances. Because of course, right? The Maroon family has for decades mounted legal challenges to block or delay the competing project known as Gordie Howe International Bridge. One of the challenges reached the Canadian Supreme Court, while the family has also lobbied extensively against it. Well, look at that. It looks like Donald Trump's problems with the bridge has nothing to do with Carney and everything to do with appeasing his billionaire friends. Donald Trump knows he can continue to make batshit crazy claims about Canada, and he'll have people in our country that'll help him out, sort of like Mario. People like Mario will just smooth over everything Donald Trump says, make excuses for him, and then find a way to blame Carney for it. And he's not the only person doing it. There's a lot of people like him. Needless to say, Canadian conservatives, at least on social media, they're in a pretty sorry state right now. And that's why I created this channel. Enough is enough of these morons. If being a conservative in Canada means sticking up for Donald Trump no matter what he does, even if it hurts my country, I want nothing to do with that anymore. Enough is enough. Thanks for tuning in. And like I said, this is a new channel, so if you like this type of content, give it a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you soon.